Just TV.
Hello everybody, my name is Jason Piercey and this is Out of the Fog. But it is also Out of the Vault because we've got one from a few years back when our very own Aaron Sully had a conversation with St. John's author and activist Helen Fogwill Porter. Now, Porter is being remembered as a writer that broke barriers in Newfoundland's literary scene. She passed away February 16th at the age of 92. She had won the Order of Canada, been named to the Order of Canada in 2000, and political activism. Regularly wrote about such difficult topics as abortion, poverty, child abuse, and was also a founding member of our province's Writers Guild and one of the founders of the Status of Women Council. And she also ran for the New Democratic Party in 4 separate elections. She's well known for her 1980 memoir, Below the Bridge, and that explored what it was like growing up on Southside Road in St. John's. In her honor, the city of St. John's named a footbridge across the Waterford River after her in 2015. And Porter's first novel, January, February, June, or July, tackled the subject of abortion and won the Young Adult Canadian Book Award from the Canadian Library Association. So what we would like to do now, in an effort to continue to celebrate Helen Fogwill Porter, is to let you watch this interview again. Enjoy.
Well, Helen, I want to thank you so much for joining me here this afternoon. We have a beautiful day to sit and have a chat. It's wonderful to see you.
Great to see you, and thanks for coming in.
So, Helen, you published your first book when you were 50 years old.
Yes.
Now, you had been writing long before that.
I started writing for publication when I was about 30 or 32. I took a creative writing class at Mon in 62. Dr. Paul Aldous, he was on the faculty, and I think it was the first one they had. And, you know, I'd always wanted to write and writing and not knowing what to do with it, you know, and all that kind of thing.
What is it that interests you about writing, or at that time when you were starting
I
out?
think it's people, and I guess everybody could say that, but I'm very curious about people and what makes them like they are, you know, and about how much influence your background has on your life. You know, the kind of family you're born into, and if you're well off or if you're poor, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I guess, and I always loved reading, and I think most writers are great readers. That comes first. My favorite fiction writer in the world is Alice Munro, and she's Canadian, of course. And a couple of years ago, she became the Nobel Prize for Literature. The first Canadian to ever get that.
Amazing.
Imagine, and I mean, you can imagine the amount of literature that's in the world, you know.
I want to talk about your first book.
Oh, yes.
1980, you wrote a memoir.
Below
it's
the
called,
Bridge.
Yeah,
yes.
Below the Bridge.
Below
so just
the
tell
Bridge.
me, you know, that kind of spoke to your community at the time.
Southside East.
Southside East.
And it was, the big thing was, by the time I wrote it, I hadn't been living there for a number of years because we moved before the place was really torn apart, you know. But then in 1962, well, I guess earlier it was decided that we needed an enlarged harbour, and they did a lot of work on the north side too, because you know the way it is around the harbour now. See, that wasn't a bit like that before. There was no road going along the harbour, you know, behind all the stores on Water Street. I mean, there was just little coves, and so they wanted to enlarge the harbour in every part that they could. And in order to do that, they had to tear down all the houses. Well, I say they had to. I don't think they really had to. But maybe it was the easiest way to do it.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they needed to do it on the... I knew they needed to do it on the water side, but like all my family lived on the land side. You know, that they didn't need that at all. But anyhow, a lot of things are done mistakenly, and people weren't protesters then very much, you know, not publicly. There was a group of, I think it was 5 people, and you must know Afterwards Bookstore.
Yes.
Yeah, well, David Benson's father was one of them, Lindsay Benson. And there was 4 men and 1 woman, and they fought that. They just fought it with everything they had. But that, you know, 5 people, I guess, weren't enough.
Why was it at that time that you wanted to write that particular book? Why a memoir?
You know, I'd always written through school, and I'd written nearly always things that were close to my life and going on in my life. But I saw, and I remember talking to my mother about it, and I may not have written that book if the South Side hadn't been destroyed. But that just had to be my first book.
You do write a lot about family, about, you know, places that you know.
Yeah.
Why, I guess, why do you choose to go that route? What is it about family that you enjoy writing
Family
about?
is very important to everyone. And I'm really obsessed with the idea that you're lucky if you get a good family. But you can't help it if you don't. You know what I mean? It's, and I had a very good family, you know. Many of my family members made mistakes, and everything like the way all of us do. But I just consider myself lucky to have grown up in the family I did.
Let's talk about January, February, June,
Yes.
or July. So this was one that was published, and at the time, I guess, with a bit of a taboo subject of abortion. I'm just wondering, were you afraid at the time when that was being published as to how people would react?
Yeah, there was no like public reaction. You know, nobody ever. I can only think of one person who kind of let me know, and he happened to be a man who was younger than me actually, and he didn't say you shouldn't have written that book, but and I would say now, I don't think in that book in particular that women liked it better than men, but I think that particular subject at that time, I think women could understand it a little more than men did, you know.
Yeah.
And well, I mean, I'm sure he got over it. Still quite friendly with him, you know. And but I don't know, you know, you don't know what people are saying. Oh, you know, I didn't think she'd write a book like that, you know, good church-going girl.
So tell us where that particular book kind of came from, the idea.
Well, see, the women's movement was just getting on the go. That had a big effect, you know, because I was a lot more conscious of those things than I would have been if it wasn't. And there's some very excellent women in locally, and people who came in from other places. Rosemary Brown was a member of the NDP. Now she was from Jamaica. She was black, and she used to, you know, I met her at a conference in Toronto, and the NDP, of course, tend to support the people who are usually not terribly wealthy, and so my father and his brothers and his sister being like that too, I was getting it sort of from angles. A lot of people my age weren't getting it, because what your parents do and who their friends are and everything, I mean, that affects the way you grow up. But I mean, I always knew, I mean, I just saw him every night. He'd be working at the railway all day, and then every night he'd be sitting down at a portable typewriter, and he'd be working for nothing. Yeah. You know, so all that has, you don't realize it, but it does have an effect on you. And people who don't go through that, I guess they don't, they're not going to, they'd probably recognize it when they get older, but I think it came to me. Yeah, so no, I just, well, for the reason that I thought it was a unique place to grow up, I definitely would have written it just for that reason.
When you think of people who influence you or who have influenced you over the years in terms of your writing, who would that be?
Well, there would be there would be writers that I knew about, and then there would be people that I knew, you know. And some of my teachers in school, I had a grade 4 teacher, Miss Simmons, Amy Simmons at Holloway, and Miss Helen Leslie was the headmistress of Holloway. That was on Longs Hill, that's long gone. So, no, I remember very vividly that when I first started getting things published, I think even before Below the Bridge, because, you know, I would have, they'd know my name, because things would be in the Telegram, in the Daily News, in Newfoundland Quarterly, you know, things like that. And then on the radio too. And when, I don't know what it was, it might have even been Below the Bridge, but I think it was before that. Miss Simmons lived in Harbour Grace, and she was retired, and she phoned me, and that was a very strange thing for anyone from out of town to phone us or phone anyone. I mean, you just didn't do it.
Yeah.
And so she said she had to phone me because she had, whatever it was, book or stories or whatever it was, she had to phone me. And so I had a lovely conversation. And I mean, I had her in grade 4, you know? And so then Miss Leslie, who was a very stern appearing person, but there was a soft part underneath. You know, I think a lot of teachers, especially then, had to be like that. Yeah. And she was the headmistress of an elementary school. And she met me downtown one day, and she stopped me on the street, and I think I had a couple of children with me. So that would probably be in the 1960s, and she was retired then. That was probably the book then, Below the Bridge. And she just talked to me a little while. I'm glad to see this. And then she just said, you always did have a flair for writing. And to even think that they noticed it.
Yeah.
You know, they had such big classes and so much to do. So that kind of thing. And
that must have been a nice moment for you, though.
It was very nice, yeah. In 1962, I noticed that there was a creative writing course at MUN. And it was not part of the curriculum. You know, it was a night class, and it was being taught by Dr. Paul Aldous, who was an American and had just come. And so I thought, I'd love to go to that. And I had the 4 children then. So, you know, I wasn't going out a lot. And of course, we stayed home. See, I stayed home for about 12 years. You know, you didn't go right back to work.
Right.
You didn't get any maternity leave or anything like that. So anyhow, I thought, oh, I'd really love to go to that. So anyhow, it was every Monday night. I think it was like for 20 weeks or something. And it was just fantastic, lovely, just what I hoped it would be. But the other thing that was so good about that course was that I met a lot of very interesting people, some older, some who were already, you know, I had published some writing. And, but I also met people my own age. And 2 of them were Bernice Morgan and Geraldine Ruba, Geraldine Chafe Ruba now. They were both in the class. And we were growing, you know, we were roughly the same age. And we were growing up in St. John's, but it's very likely that our paths would not have crossed. Because, I mean, there's lots of people in St. John's I don't know, you know.
Probably not too many.
not too many now, maybe. But anyway, and so we were all in, you know, we were kind of in this together. We understood each other. Because some of my friends, you know, why are you going to that? If you're going out, sure, you got to get babysitters, and why would you, you know?
Almost seemed like too much trouble, they were
Yes,
thinking.
and it was an absolutely great beginning, and we're friends to this day. And I really admire both their writing. Eventually, we started ourselves 3 bag ladies, because wherever we went, we'd have a bag full of books and stuff, you know.
Right. I want to talk about your Order of Canada. You've had so many accolades and, you know, awards and such over your career, but for the Order of Canada, when you found out that you would be receiving this, what kind of went through your mind at that time?
I was totally astonished, absolutely. was December, early December when they phoned me, or November, and they're announced in December anyway every year. And I knew about them, of course, because I know some people who have them already. But I just couldn't believe my ears, and so anyhow, it was totally, completely a surprise. And they won't tell you who nominated, all that kept very much a secret.
Now, you also had to keep it a secret for a while
I had
yourself.
to. I had
Was that
to
a hard
till the
secret
end
to
of
keep?
December. It comes out on New Year's Eve. I think I said to her, "Can I tell my family?" The employee I was talking to there, and she was very understanding. She said, "Yes, but absolutely, your immediate family, nobody else." Well, I think probably what it means most. Well, I'm very much of a Canadian now. We actually were even for Confederation, and that a lot of people like my father, left wing type, and that sort of thing, were because Newfoundland was in a very desperate state, during the Depression and after, and so it's never hurt me. I can still get mad with mainlanders who don't understand Newfoundland, and they're getting better. But, and the Newfie jokes and all that. But I think in the long run, it was something we had to do, So now, America, that's a different matter. And,
But you must have been
I was
so pleased with
very
yourself.
proud, and as I said, I'm glad to be a Canadian, and I'm also glad to be a Newfoundlander. I'm glad you can be both of it at the same time.
This of Women Council. I'm just wondering, are you happy with what has been accomplished
Oh,
so far?
I think it's so much better than it used to be, but it is kind of depressing sometimes. An excellent example would be Donald Trump. We still have a lot of people like him who I think would like to see women barefoot pregnant in the kitchen. I really do, and that's irritating because there's no excuse for being like that anymore. But I think too that some people who it often is people who are in jobs, that don't pay very well. Somehow they think a rich person will save them, more so than they almost, some people sort of envy the rich, and
Right.
they think they'll be, if they're a follower of him,
That's almost
they'll
the
get
answer.
what they learn how to do what he does,
Right, right.
Yeah.
Now, as well as women's equality, obviously very heavily involved in politics, specifically the NDP party.
Yeah, definitely.
You
yes.
ran 4 times. There is even a Helen Fogwill Porter Fund, which I guess helps to encourage or support women who have an interest in running for the NDP.
That's mostly for running, yes.
Yeah.
I was one of the early women who ran for the NDP, and I ran twice. It was in the kind of between 1975 and 1985. And so I never did get elected, and I didn't feel very sad about it because but it was important, I thought, for women to be running then.
So was it more of a statement of being a woman and running for
Partly,
politics?
but I also believed in the NDP politics, and I met a lot of the NDP women who had been elected, and people who worked from the sidelines. I don't know if I would have been the same if my father hadn't been in unions all his life, and in them, for certainly not to get anything out of them for himself, but because he thought it would make for a better life.
Mm-hmm.
And then my mother was the same, but at that time, she was still more bound to the home. But one thing she said about Confederation, and there were 5 of us, and the family allowance checks came out, and she said, it's the first time I've ever had a check in my own name.
Wow.
You know, and I'd
Amazing.
never thought of that before.
When you look back throughout your career, what you've what you've published, your involvement in politics with women's equality, what would you want to be most remembered by?
I think the writing. I think would be the writing, yeah.
And why is that?
I don't know, because I think by writing I've communicated with more people than I have with anything else. Because in the work like politics and all the other stuff, you basically compete, you're connecting with people you know, but with writing you're connecting with people you don't know. I'll just tell you one quick little story. There was one, and this is not terribly long ago, it was probably in the last 20 years. And it was when what was it? Oh yeah, finishing school. So the latest book,
Yes,
so
your
it's not that
latest
long
one,
ago.
that's right.
And when it came out, it was reviewed in a magazine that was published, I don't know if it is now or not, somewhere in Nova Scotia. And it did a lot of book reviews. It was a literary magazine. And so this woman had a review of the book, Finishing School, and she absolutely panned it. The worst panning I ever got in any book I ever did in my life.
Really?
And luckily it didn't affect me very much, because I just thought, like one of the things she said was the book's titled Finishing School, and she doesn't finish school. She goes to night school, and near the end, it's all done in journal form, and near the end, it's very clear in the book that she decides she could finish then, but she'd like to go back for another term, because she thinks she needs to learn a bit more. So she was still in the process of finishing school. Anyhow, I mean, you get over that impulse to write a letter to the editor, why did she do this to me, and all that. Never heard of her before, never heard of her since. And it was, competently written. Anyway, I got a letter, I mean, this is like something in a dream. I got a letter from a woman in Ontario, a teacher, and she had read, it's a wonder she ever read it, she had read this piece because it was in an Atlantic magazine, But she's a real reader, And she said, when she read the review, she said, can't be that bad, I got to read it. She got it, and she read it, and she gave it to her class.
Oh.
And, so it's almost like something you'd make up. So that was very, very heartening.
Yeah.
And I mean, that doesn't always happen when you get a bad review, but it was wonderful.
It's nice to see some positivity come from.
And the communication you have with people you never met and you never will meet,
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's something, those things really stay in your mind.
Well, Helen, I want to thank you so much for taking the time and sitting to chat with me today about your career and, of course, life as a writer, and big congratulations on being awarded the Order of Canada.
Well, thank you very much for deciding to do this and for coming in, and thanks very much to the invisible person who's doing the filming.
That's Perry. Doing a wonderful job.
Yes, and we wouldn't exist, this wouldn't exist without him and people like him, would it?
No, not at all. A lot of truth there in that.
And I hope when it's shown that it will reach people who may be thinking, maybe I'd like to be a writer. Well, how do you do it? I wonder what you do. And it's not a guide to writing, but it always helped me when I read books by people that the books that really got to me. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your story.
You're
Really
very
appreciate it.
welcome.
It's been a pleasure.
Keep doing your good job.
Thank you.
So obviously, Helen Fogwill Porter is a force of a human being. To be the Order of Canada is no small accomplishment, and there's nothing small about talking about such difficult, heavy, and incredibly important topics in your writing? Well, Ms. Porter, you will be missed and celebrated. Check out for any of her books. I'm gonna do the same. Have a great night, and we'll see you next time.
Hi, I'm Justice.
And I'm Nia. And we believe dreams fuel revolutions.
That's why we're engaging with Canadian icons and the causes they support.
Inspiring conversations and find out how you can be rebel.
If you have a comment about this program, we'd love to hear it. Email or call us or send us your feedback through social media.